In 1492, the same year Columbus set sail for the New World, something catastrophic was happening in the Old World. The largest, wealthiest, and most culturally advanced Jewish community in Europe was being torn apart. Families who had lived in Spain for over 1,000 years were given an impossible choice: convert to Christianity, flee with nothing, or die. Within months, somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 Jews were expelled from Spain. They scattered across the Mediterranean to Portugal, Morocco, the Ottoman Empire, Italy, and beyond. Many carried keys to their Spanish homes, believing they would one day return. They never did. These were the Sephardic Jews, and their story is one of the most extraordinary in all of human history. Before their expulsion, Sephardic Jews had created something remarkable. During the so-called Golden Age of Spain, they produced philosophers who shaped Western thought, poets whose works still move us today, scientists who advanced human knowledge, and diplomats who served kings and caliphs alike. They did not just survive in medieval Spain, they thrived. And when they were expelled, they carried their culture, their language, and their identity to every corner of the world. So who were the Sephardic Jews? When did they first arrive in Spain? What made their civilization so extraordinary? And how did they survive the greatest catastrophe in Jewish history before the Holocaust? Today, we are telling the full story, from ancient Rome to the Spanish Inquisition, from the Golden Age to the global diaspora. If you love Jewish history, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles. Let's begin. What does Sephardic mean? The term Sephardic comes from Sepharad, the Hebrew word for Spain. The name appears once in the Hebrew Bible, in the book of Obadiah, which mentions the exiles of Jerusalem who are in Sepharad. Medieval Jewish commentators identified Sepharad with the Iberian Peninsula, and Jews living there became known as Sephardim. But here is what many people do not realize. The term Sephardic has two different meanings today. In the strict historical sense, Sephardic Jews are the descendants of Jews who lived in Spain and Portugal before the expulsions of the 1490s, and who maintained distinct Sephardic traditions, liturgy, and often the Ladino language after they dispersed. In a broader sense, Sephardic is sometimes used to describe all non-Ashkenazi Jews, including Mizrahi Jews from the Middle East and North Africa who never had any connection to Spain. This broader usage developed partly because Sephardic rabbis and traditions became dominant in many Middle Eastern communities after Spanish Jews arrived following the expulsion. In this video, we are focusing on the original Sephardic Jews, those whose ancestors actually lived in Iberia and who developed the distinctive Sephardic civilization that flourished there for over a millennium. Their story begins not in the Middle Ages, but in ancient times, possibly as early as the reign of King Solomon himself. Ancient origins. How did Jews reach Spain? When exactly did Jews first arrive in the Iberian Peninsula? The honest answer is, we do not know for certain, but the evidence suggests it was very, very early. Jewish tradition holds that Jews came to Spain during the time of King Solomon around the 10th century BCE as part of Phoenician trading expeditions. The Phoenicians, based in what is now Lebanon, were the great maritime traders of the ancient world, and they established colonies throughout the Mediterranean, including in Spain. Some traditions claim that Jewish merchants traveled with them. While we cannot verify this with archaeological evidence, it is not implausible. Jews and Phoenicians were neighbors in the ancient Levant, and commercial partnerships would have been natural. What we can verify is that Jews were present in Spain during the Roman period. After Rome conquered the Iberian Peninsula in the 2nd century BCE, Jewish merchants and settlers followed Roman expansion, just as they did throughout the Mediterranean world. Archaeological evidence confirms Jewish presence in Spain by the 1st century CE. Inscriptions, artifacts, and later literary references all point to established Jewish communities in Roman Hispania. This evidence is clear across multiple sources. When the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE and crushed subsequent Jewish revolts, waves of Jewish refugees and captives spread throughout the empire. Many ended up in Spain, adding to existing communities. By the time the Roman Empire began to Christianize in the 4th century, Jewish communities were well established in major Spanish cities. Church councils from this period include canons specifically addressing Jewish-Christian relations, proof that Jews were numerous enough to warrant official attention. The Council of Iberia, held around 306 CE in southern Spain, included several provisions restricting interactions between Christians and Jews, forbidding intermarriage, prohibiting Christians from sharing meals with Jews, and banning Christians from having Jews bless their crops. These restrictions tell us something important. Jews and Christians in Roman Spain lived in close proximity and had extensive social and economic interactions. The Church felt the need to create boundaries precisely because the communities were so intertwined. The Visigothic period, early persecution. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, Germanic tribes swept across Europe. Spain fell to the Visigoths, who established a kingdom that would last until the Muslim conquest in 711 CE. The Visigothic period was difficult for Spanish Jews. Initially, the Visigoths practiced Arian Christianity, which was considered heretical by the Catholic Church. During this early period, Jews faced relatively fewer restrictions. But when King Recared converted to Catholicism in 589 CE, everything changed. The newly Catholic Visigothic kings, eager to prove their orthodoxy, began implementing harsh anti-Jewish measures. Over the following century, Jews faced forced conversions, restrictions on religious practice, prohibitions on holding public office, and even attempts at complete expulsion. These measures were harsh and far-reaching. King Sigebut ordered forced conversions around 613 CE. King Erwig in 681 CE issued a comprehensive legal code that essentially made Jewish life impossible. Jews could not practice their religion, observe the Sabbath, celebrate holidays, or circumcise their sons. Some Jews converted, at least outwardly, while continuing to practice Judaism in secret, a pattern that would repeat centuries later with devastating consequences. Others fled to areas outside Visigothic control. Many simply endured, waiting for circumstances to change. They did not have to wait long. If you love Jewish history, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles. The Muslim Conquest, a New Beginning. In 711 CE, Muslim armies from North Africa crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and rapidly conquered most of the Iberian Peninsula. The Visigothic kingdom collapsed almost overnight. For Spanish Jews, this was a dramatic turning point. Under Islamic rule, Jews were classified as dhimmis, protected peoples of the book. They faced certain restrictions and had to pay a special tax called the jizya, but they were generally free to practice their religion, govern their own communities, and participate in economic life. Compared to the persecution of the late Visigothic period, this was liberation. Some historical accounts suggest that Jews actively assisted the Muslim conquest, opening city gates or providing intelligence. Whether or not these specific stories are accurate, it is clear that Jews welcomed the change in rulers. Over the following centuries, as Muslim Spain, known as Al-Andalus, developed into one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the medieval world, Jews flourished alongside their Muslim neighbors. This was the beginning of what historians call the Golden Age of Spanish Jewry. The Golden Age, Sephardic civilization at its height. The Golden Age of Sephardic Jewry, spanning roughly from the 10th to the 12th centuries, represents one of the most remarkable periods in Jewish history. During this era, Spanish Jews achieved extraordinary prominence in virtually every field of human endeavor, including philosophy, poetry, science, medicine, linguistics, diplomacy, and commerce. Consider some of the towering figures who emerged from this civilization. Hasdai ibn Shaprut, from 915 to 970 CE, served as a physician and diplomat to the Caliph of Cordoba. He conducted foreign policy negotiations, corresponded with rulers across Europe and the Middle East, and used his position to benefit Jewish communities throughout the world. He famously exchanged letters with the king of the Khazars, seeking information about that distant Jewish kingdom. Samuel ibn Nagrela, known as Shmuel Hanagid, from 993 to 1056 CE, rose to become the vizier, essentially the prime minister, of the Taifa of Granada. He was also a military commander who led Muslim armies into battle, a brilliant poet, and a major Talmudic scholar. There has never been another figure quite like him in Jewish history. Solomon ibn Gabirol, from 1021 to 1058 CE, was a philosopher and poet whose works influenced both Jewish and Christian thought. His philosophical treatise, Fons Vitae, The Fountain of Life, was so admired by Christian scholars that for centuries they did not realize its author was Jewish. Judah Halevi, from 1075 to 1141 CE, is considered one of the greatest Hebrew poets of all time. His poems of longing for Zion still move readers today, and his philosophical work, the Kuzari, remains influential. According to tradition, he died in the land of Israel after finally making the pilgrimage he had dreamed of for years. Moses Maimonides, from 1138 to 1204 CE, is arguably the most influential Jewish thinker since the Talmudic era. Born in Cordoba, Maimonides fled Spain during a period of persecution and eventually settled in Egypt, where he served as physician to the Sultan. His legal code, the Mishnah Torah, systematized Jewish law. His philosophical masterpiece, The Guide for the Perplexed, attempted to reconcile Jewish faith with Aristotelian philosophy and influenced Thomas Aquinas and other Christian thinkers. These individuals were not exceptions. They emerged from a culture that valued learning, celebrated intellectual achievement, and provided opportunities for Jews to excel. What made this golden age possible? Several factors converged. The relative tolerance of Islamic rule allowed Jews to participate in broader society. The thriving economy of Al-Andalus created opportunities for commerce and patronage. The culture of convivencia, the coexistence of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, fostered intellectual exchange. And the Jewish community itself cultivated education and scholarship as core values. Sephardic Jews during this period developed distinctive religious traditions, liturgical poetry called piyutim, philosophical approaches, and cultural styles that would define Sephardic identity for centuries to come. They also began developing a distinctive language, Ladino, sometimes called Judeo-Spanish. This was a form of medieval Spanish infused with Hebrew words and written in Hebrew characters. Like Yiddish for Ashkenazi Jews, Ladino would become a marker of Sephardic identity that persisted long after they left Spain. The Reconquista, a changing world. The Golden Age couldn't last forever. From the north, Christian kingdoms such as Castile, Aragon, Leon, Navarre, and Portugal were slowly reconquering the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule. This process, known as the Reconquista, took centuries. By the 13th century, most of Spain was under Christian control. Initially, Jews in Christian Spain continued to thrive. Christian kings valued Jewish expertise in finance, medicine, translation, and administration. Jews served in royal courts, managed estates, and facilitated the cultural transfer of Arabic learning into Latin Christendom. But the situation gradually deteriorated. The Catholic Church grew increasingly hostile to Jewish-Christian interaction. Pressure mounted for Jews to convert. Restrictions tightened. Jews were forced to live in separate quarters called juderias, wear identifying badges, and face limitations on their professions. Then came the catastrophe of 1391. Incited by inflammatory preaching from a priest named Ferran Martinez, massive anti-Jewish riots swept across Spain. Mobs attacked Jewish quarters in Seville, Córdoba, Toledo, Barcelona, and dozens of other cities. Thousands of Jews were murdered. Synagogues were destroyed or converted into churches. Entire communities were annihilated. Faced with death, many Jews converted to Christianity. These converts became known as Conversos, and their status would haunt Spanish society for the next century. If you love Jewish history, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles. Conversos and the Inquisition. The mass conversions of 1391 and subsequent years created an unprecedented situation. Suddenly, there were tens of thousands of new Christians in Spain, people of Jewish ancestry who had converted, sometimes under threat of death. Many integrated into Christian society, intermarrying with old Christian families and rising to prominent positions in the church, government, and economy. But suspicion followed them. Many old Christians questioned whether the conversions were genuine. Rumors circulated that conversos secretly practiced Judaism, and in many cases, the rumors were true. Some conversos did maintain Jewish practices in secret, observing Sabbath, keeping dietary laws, and passing traditions to their children. These secret Jews became known as crypto-Jews, and more pejoratively as marranos, a derogatory term meaning swine. In 1478, the Spanish Inquisition was established specifically to investigate the religious sincerity of conversos. Unlike other medieval inquisitions that targeted heresy generally, the Spanish Inquisition focused obsessively on detecting secret Judaism among new Christians. The Inquisition's methods were brutal. Suspects were imprisoned, tortured, and tried in secret. Neighbors and family members were encouraged to inform on each other. Specific behaviors such as changing linens on Friday, avoiding pork, and lighting candles on Friday evening were treated as evidence of secret Jewish practice. Those found guilty faced punishments ranging from public humiliation and confiscation of property to imprisonment and death by burning at the stake. The auto da fé, public ceremonies where sentences were announced and carried out, became grim spectacles in Spanish cities. The Inquisition created an atmosphere of terror that poisoned Spanish society for generations. 1492, the expulsion. By 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella had completed the Reconquista by conquering Granada, the last Muslim stronghold in Spain. In the flush of this victory, they turned their attention to the Jewish problem. On March 31, 1492, the monarchs signed the Alhambra Decree, ordering all Jews in Spain to convert to Christianity or leave the kingdom by July 31st. Jews had just 4 months to wind up affairs that had developed over more than 1,000 years. The decree blamed Jews for encouraging conversos to return to Judaism, though the real motivations were complex, involving religious zeal, economic opportunism, and political calculation. Estimates of how many Jews were affected vary widely. Scholars suggest somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 Jews faced the choice. Some converted and stayed, swelling the ranks of the conversos. The majority chose exile. They were forbidden from taking gold, silver, or currency with them. They had to sell property at a fraction of its value to buyers who knew the Jews had no bargaining power. Fortunes built over generations evaporated in weeks. Contemporary accounts describe the Exodus as heartbreaking. Isaac Abravanel, a prominent Jewish leader who served Ferdinand and Isabella, reportedly offered enormous sums to have the decree rescinded. Legend says the monarchs were tempted until the Grand Inquisitor Tomás de Torquemada appeared and threw down a crucifix, accusing them of selling Christ like Judas. As the deadline approached, long columns of Jewish refugees made their way to ports and borders. Some collapsed from exhaustion or illness along the way. Others were robbed or murdered by bandits who knew they were carrying whatever portable wealth they had managed to salvage. Rabbi Isaac Abravanel later wrote, "And in that month of Ab, the month of mourning, 300,000 Jews left Spain, and they went, walking on foot in great suffering, young and old, men and women, on roads and through fields." Where did they go? The Sephardic diaspora, scattering and survival. The expelled Spanish Jews scattered across the Mediterranean world, carrying their culture, their language, and their memories wherever they went. Portugal initially accepted many refugees, but this proved a temporary haven. In 1497, King Manuel I, pressured by Spain as a condition for a marriage alliance, ordered all Jews in Portugal to convert or leave. In a cruel twist, he actually prevented most from leaving, trapping them and forcing mass conversion. The Portuguese Converso community that resulted would produce many crypto-Jews who maintained secret Jewish identity for centuries. The Ottoman Empire proved the most welcoming destination. Sultan Bayezid II reportedly mocked Ferdinand's decision, asking, "You call Ferdinand a wise king? He has impoverished his own land and enriched mine." The Ottomans settled Sephardic Jews in Istanbul, Salonika, Izmir, and throughout their empire. Salonika, known today as Thessaloniki in modern Greece, became so Jewish that it was known as La Madre de Israel, the Mother of Israel. North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia received thousands of refugees who joined existing Jewish communities there. These Spanish Jews were known as Megorashim and sometimes clashed with the Toshavim, the Jews who had lived in North Africa for centuries. Eventually, the communities merged, though distinctions persisted for generations. Italy welcomed Sephardic Jews in several city-states, particularly in Venice, Livorno, and Ferrara. These communities became centers of Sephardic publishing and culture. The Netherlands, after gaining independence from Spain in the late 16th century, became a refuge for conversos who wanted to return openly to Judaism. Amsterdam's Portuguese Jewish community became famous for its wealth, culture, and beautiful synagogue, and would later play a role in Jewish settlement in the Americas. The Americas eventually received Sephardic Jews as well. Some conversos traveled to the New World seeking distance from the Inquisition, though the Inquisition eventually followed them to Mexico and Peru. The first Jews in North America were Sephardic. In 1654, 23 Sephardic Jews fleeing Brazil arrived in New Amsterdam, later New York. Wherever they went, Sephardic Jews maintained their distinctive traditions, liturgy, and culture. They continued speaking Ladino, singing the old songs, cooking the old foods, and following the religious customs developed in medieval Spain. In Salonika, well into the 20th century, stevedores on the docks spoke Ladino. In Turkey and Greece, elderly Sephardic Jews still used expressions and proverbs from medieval Spanish. In the Mellah of Morocco, Sephardic families passed down stories of their origins in Toledo or Cordoba. The expulsion scattered the Sephardic world, but it did not destroy it. If you love Jewish history, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles. the genetic evidence confirms ancient origins. Modern genetics has given us powerful tools to examine the origins of the Sephardic Jews. The results confirm what history suggested. Sephardic Jews are descended from populations that originated in the ancient Middle East, specifically the Levant, the region including modern Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria. Studies comparing Sephardic DNA with other populations show that Sephardic Jews cluster genetically with other Jewish populations, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, and others, despite centuries of geographic separation. They share genetic markers indicating common Middle Eastern ancestry. Like Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardic Jews show evidence of admixture with local European populations, in this case with Iberian and Mediterranean peoples. This makes sense given their long residence in Spain and subsequent dispersion throughout the Mediterranean. Male lineages, meaning Y chromosome haplogroups, show significant Middle Eastern ancestry, particularly haplogroups J1 and J2, which are common in Levantine populations. Female lineages, mitochondrial DNA, show more diverse origins, suggesting, as with Ashkenazi Jews, that Jewish men sometimes married local women who converted and joined the community. Y chromosome and mitochondrial patterns tell complementary parts of the story. Genetic studies have also confirmed the crypto-Jewish heritage of certain populations. In Spain, Portugal, and Latin America, researchers have found individuals with genetic signatures suggesting Sephardic Jewish ancestry, descendants of Conversos who may have lost all knowledge of their Jewish origins, but whose DNA still tells the story. In New Mexico and other parts of the American Southwest, some Hispanic families have maintained unusual traditions for centuries, lighting candles on Friday night, avoiding pork, observing quasi-Sabbath practices without understanding why. Genetic testing has revealed that many of these families carry Sephardic Jewish ancestry, confirming their descent from Conversos who fled the Inquisition to the remotest corners of the Spanish Empire. The genetic evidence is clear. Sephardic Jews trace their ancestry to the ancient land of Israel, just as their traditions always claimed. This evidence ties memory to biology and history to genetic continuity. The Ladino language is a living memorial. One of the most poignant legacies of Sephardic civilization is Ladino, also called Judeo-Spanish, Judesmo, or Spaniolit. It developed from the medieval Spanish spoken by Jews before the expulsion. After 1492, as Sephardic Jews scattered across the Ottoman Empire and beyond, they carried this language with them. Isolated from Spain and the evolution of Castilian Spanish into its modern form, Ladino preserved features of medieval Spanish that disappeared from the language as spoken in Spain. Linguists have noted that Ladino contains words, pronunciations, and grammatical structures that would be familiar to someone from 15th century Castile. Medieval elements remain woven through everyday speech. Like Yiddish, Ladino incorporated Hebrew words for religious concepts and borrowed from the languages of surrounding cultures, Turkish, Greek, Arabic, and others. It was written in Hebrew characters, creating a visible connection to Jewish tradition. Hebrew script reinforced cultural continuity. Ladino became the vehicle for a rich literary culture. Sephardic Jews composed poetry, songs, proverbs, and religious texts in Ladino. The romances, Ladino ballads passed down orally for generations, preserved stories and melodies from medieval Spain. Romances carried memory across oceans and centuries. The language survived for centuries in Sephardic communities throughout the Ottoman Empire. As late as the early 20th century, newspapers were published in Ladino in Salonika, Istanbul, and other cities. This public life helped Ladino survive and adapt. Survived is the right word for how long it endured. The Holocaust dealt a devastating blow to Ladino. The Nazis murdered the vast majority of Sephardic Jews in Greece and the Balkans, the heartland of Ladino-speaking Jewry. The ancient community of Salonika, once 80,000 strong, was almost entirely annihilated. Today, Ladino is critically endangered. Perhaps 100,000 people still speak it, mostly elderly. Efforts are underway to preserve and revitalize the language, but its future remains uncertain. Yet even in its decline, Ladino stands as a testament to Sephardic resilience. For 5 centuries after the expulsion, scattered across the world, Sephardic Jews continued speaking the language of their Spanish homeland, a homeland that had rejected them, but that they never forgot. Where are Sephardic Jews today? The largest Sephardic community is in Israel, where Jews from Turkey, Greece, the Balkans, North Africa, and other Sephardic diaspora communities gathered after the state's founding. Sephardic and Mizrahi Jews together constitute roughly half of Israel's Jewish population. Significant Sephardic communities exist in France, largely from North Africa, the United States, Latin America, and other countries. Some historic communities persist in Turkey, though greatly diminished from their former size. Sephardic religious traditions, liturgy, melodies, customs, and legal rulings remain distinct from Ashkenazi practice. The Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel represents these traditions officially. Sephardic synagogues around the world maintain their distinctive style of worship. Sephardic cuisine has gained wide appreciation. Dishes like burekas, shakshuka, and various North African and Middle Eastern foods reflect the culinary traditions developed over centuries in Spain and the lands of the diaspora. And the memory of Spain persists. In 2015, the Spanish government passed a law offering citizenship to descendants of expelled Sephardic Jews. Tens of thousands applied, seeking to reclaim a connection to the land their ancestors were forced to leave in 1492. Some Sephardic families still possess the keys their ancestors carried out of Spain in 1492, keys to houses that no longer exist, in cities that have transformed beyond recognition. These keys are powerful symbols of loss, of memory, of the stubborn refusal to forget. The story of the Sephardic Jews is one of the most extraordinary in human history. For over 1,000 years, they built a civilization in Spain that reached remarkable heights of cultural, intellectual, and spiritual achievement. They produced philosophers and poets, scientists and statesmen. They created a distinctive culture that blended Jewish tradition with the influences of Islamic and Christian Spain. And then, in a matter of months, it was torn away. The expulsion of 1492 was a catastrophe, but it was not the end. Scattered across the world, Sephardic Jews rebuilt their communities. They maintained their traditions. They preserved their language. They remembered who they were. 5 centuries later, their descendants still light candles on Friday night, still sing the old songs, still tell the stories of Toledo, Cordoba, and Seville. The rabbis teach that the Jewish people are compared to the stars. When they are cast down, they shine even brighter. The Sephardic Jews were cast down from Spain, but they never stopped shining. If you love Jewish history, make sure you subscribe to Jews Chronicles and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Shalom.